The Being an Engineer podcast is a repository for industry knowledge and a tool through which engineers learn about and connect with relevant companies, technologies, people, resources, and opportunities. Enjoy the show.
I gotta tell you, when your peers go out of their way to tell you something like that, it's scary for them. So when you say, when you lead with "thank you for bringing this to my attention," you help disarm the situation because they don't know how you're going to react, right? There's not a lot to gain for them when they come to you like that, and there's a lot to lose.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we're going to talk about soft skills, and we're going to do so with an expert, Dave Smith. Dave and his co-founder, Jameson Dance, founded the Soft Skills Engineering podcast, where they answer questions from technical people about non-technical work problems. Both Dave and Jameson have worked as software engineers from staff levels through director levels at a variety of companies, including Lockheed Martin, Walmart, and Amazon, to name a few. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So tell me, what made you decide to become a software engineer?
I think I'm going to have to go back and tell some stories of my youth, maybe, and a little bit of evolution of how things evolved there. I kind of stumbled into software reluctantly because as a young teenager, I thought that I could never possibly do a job where I have to sit in front of a computer all day. Which is just kind of a ridiculous thing to even say out loud nowadays. But growing up in the 90s as a teenager, I thought, boy, I really just can't sit in front of a computer all day. So nevertheless, I got exposed to programming at a pretty young age. I think I was maybe 15 or 16 when I got one of those school-required graphing calculators, the TI-82 model, if memory serves, which had on it this flavor of BASIC that you could write little programs on to do things with the screen on the calculator, just a monochrome small screen. And I got hooked. I mean, I would sit on my bed at night with my two thumbs on the calculator, just typing in these commands with this tiny little screen that was probably 1.5 inches, 2 inches in diagonal. Little did I know that fast forward 20 years, and we would all be sitting in our beds with our two thumbs late at night staring at little screens. I guess I was a little ahead of my time, but that's really where I got hooked on the whole concept of typing in commands to a computer and having it do things. And then from there, it was just kind of an inevitability that eventually I landed in the profession of software engineering, despite my best efforts. But I did have a detour into mechanical engineering where I majored for a year in college. Couldn't hack it there, didn't really love it. I think the straw that broke the camel's back there was when my drafting professor told me that I needed to hold my pencil at, I think he said 27.5 degrees off the page for drawing, and I just thought, this isn't for me. So anyway, I switched majors into programming, and it's just been a wild ride, and I've never looked back since.
I'm surprised you even had a drafting class. I mean, you and I think we're about the same age, and I didn't even know that was an option when I went through school. There was CAD, I didn't see any drafting.
It was. I remember. So it was ME 172. I'll never forget. Dr. Razor was the name of the professor. I think the class was like half drawing with protractors and compasses, and then half CAD. You know, and he was old school. He was like, "Here's how you hold the pencil." You know.
Jeez, huh?
It was
cool. We're a little bit beyond that these days, aren't we?
We are, but I respect it. I respect it.
You know, I took a drafting class in high school, and that was one of my favorite classes. And it really did give me the fundamentals of, I think, being able to visualize things in 3D. So from that standpoint, it was really useful, but I don't ever recall, even in high school, a teacher telling me you have to hold your pencil at 27.5 degrees relative to the paper in order to... Okay. Well, can you give us a quick summary then of, so you had a little stint in mechanical engineering in college. You ended up switching to computer science and graduating with a degree there. And now you are the VP of engineering for a software development team. Fill in the blanks between then and now. How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, so between then and now is about a 24-year span from 1997 to today, which is 2021. I did the computer science degree, just had a fantastic time. I mean, I just absolutely loved it. At one point, I remember meeting with my guidance counselor in the computer science department, who advised me that I was taking too many computer science classes concurrently and that I was not going to do well. But for whatever reason, it just clicked with me, and I could take 4 classes a semester and just bang through them so fast. I just had a great time with it. I mean, computer graphics, databases, networking, so many awesome classes that just really resonated. So I really knew I was onto something there when it was like effortless and fun to just work many, many hours a week and then get pretty good grades, right? So I just loved it. But anyway, I graduated from with a computer science degree. And many of your listeners, I don't really know the age demographic, but many of them will be surprised to hear that at the year I graduated from school with a CS degree, it was very hard for software developers to find work. This was 2003.
Interesting.
The dot-com bubble had burst a couple of years prior, and we had not yet recovered. We were probably a couple of years away from full, I don't know if I could say full recovery, but back to where, you started seeing kind of that super high demand for software engineers again. And so the job I got out of college, I was one of 200 applicants for 3 positions.
Wow.
And just got lucky enough to get that job. I applied for 7 jobs and I only got callbacks on 2, and I got in-person interviews on 1, and I was fortunate enough to get that job. So it was a tough time to start out your career in software engineering. But I remember hearing stories of classmates who had graduated years prior, like 1 or 2 years before me, who had offers from big companies like Intel and others, who between the time they made the offer and their start date, they called them up, and Intel would call these people up and say, "Look, your offer is rescinded. Keep the signing bonus. You're not coming to work for us."
Oh no!
So yeah, it was a rough time. But fortunately, the whole market really recovered very quickly. So within a couple of years, it was back to good, and it's been wild ever since. Nowadays it's the opposite, where you have 200 jobs vying for 3 software engineers instead of 200 software engineers vying for 3 jobs.
What do you think of these coding boot camps? They've become popular over the past, 4, 5, 6 years. Are they effective? How does a graduate of a coding boot camp compare with a graduate from a university who maybe has a CS degree like you had?
Well, my confirmation bias, of course, it has to take over here, and I'll have to tell you that I think my path was better than any other path.
Of course.
But so I actually taught at a coding boot camp for a couple of years part-time, just did a few classes here and there. I'm very supportive of the idea of alternative entry points into the software engineering industry. I think that having one funnel that everybody has to fit through is not good for the industry. I think it cuts some people out, and it overemphasizes some skills that are not necessarily needed. And I think there's such a big demand for software engineering right now that we should be, as an economy or as an industry, we should try to find as many avenues to find qualified people or to train people into that industry as possible. So in general, I am supportive of it. However, what I have found in recent years is that bootcamp graduates really, really struggle to find employment for the first 6 to 12 months after they graduate. I've mentored several people who came out of a boot camp who are just absolutely not able to get jobs. People won't call them back. So I think that it's not the silver bullet that a lot of people thought it would be. You go to a boot camp 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and then you show up and then the offer letters start flowing. That's just not the reality that I've seen recently. That was the case, I think, in 2014, 2015, when the concept kind of hit the scene. But now it takes more time. So basically, I think it's kind of like a black belt in martial arts, where people have this idea that as a black belt, you're a master of martial arts. But in reality, black belt is when martial artists really start to learn. It's like you've qualified to begin the actual path to mastery. And I think bootcamp graduation is kind of like that. You're now able, enough to really know how to start learning, and you're probably a year out from being really in high demand on the market.
Got it. So the training that one would get at a bootcamp really isn't quite as thorough or complete as the training that you would get going through a 4-year degree at a university or something.
It is certainly less thorough. It is also very narrowly focused on very specific technologies, whereas a 4-year degree, I think, has two advantages and some disadvantages compared to the boot camp. The two advantages it has is, number one, you get exposed to a broader set of areas of study. For example, I took classes in databases, so I had to learn how database indexing happens at the disk level and all the algorithms that databases use. Not all, some algorithms that databases use. But that's it. That was kind of my exposure. At a boot camp, on the other hand, you'll learn one database. You will not learn underlying principles. You'll learn some commands. So that's one difference. The second big difference is just time. Like it took my mind years to get to a point where I could kind of think like software thinks. I could have all the kind of the vocabulary in my mind. It's kind of like learning another language. Like it just takes exposure and time to know how to think that way. And that's something that a boot camp, by definition, doesn't offer. So 4 years of just thinking in terms of software development full time makes a difference. But I should state that neither fresh computer science grads nor boot camp grads are super qualified to do software development on the first day out of school. They both actually still have a lot to learn. And I think that leads me to the big difference between the two, or the big disadvantage of a 4-year degree is it is generally a lot more expensive in terms of money, but also in terms of opportunity cost because of all the time you have to invest.
So what advice do you give to folks out there who maybe they just graduated high school and they're trying to figure out what path to take? Do I go the boot camp path and then try to get some, simple work under my belt that I can point to as real experience, or do I pull the trigger and pay the money and go to a 4-year university? So
that depends a lot on your situation. And so the factors that I tend to take into consideration when I advise folks is, I say, you just mentioned someone straight out of high school. So first of all, I know that you're young. And so you have a lot of years ahead of you. You're not 20 years into another career and considering switching, where the switching cost of a 4-year degree would be very high. So you're young, which means the opportunity costs are low. And I would say if you have access to a low-cost 4-year university that will train you in computer science, I would almost always put that as my number one option to recommend. However, I would not recommend, incurring huge amounts of debt to get a computer science degree, and so it becomes complicated. So that's where I would recommend. And the reason I recommend that is because the 4-year college experience for a young person has a lot of other advantages besides just career training. You meet people that will be significant to you for the rest of your life. Some of my most meaningful and valuable relationships were ones that I formed in college. You're kind of going through the fiery furnace together, right? And you stay together and you have great contacts for the rest of your life. So that's just really, really valuable. You could probably get that from a boot camp too. But so that's kind of where I default to is that. But it's very, very important that you not go and get $150,000 of student debt. If that's the option, then I would probably not lean there.
Well said. That makes sense. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and start talking about the Soft Skills Engineering podcast that you and your co-host Jameson started. First of all, how did the two of you meet, and then how did you decide to start the podcast?
Well, Jameson and I were on another podcast called JavaScript Jabber. I want to say like close to 10 years ago. Maybe not, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, somewhere in there. And we did that podcast for a while, a couple of years. And at some point, I remember Jameson came to me just with some career advice. He's like, hey, he wasn't offering advice, although I gladly accept his advice. He came to me with just a question about his own job. And he's like, how do I navigate this weird situation at work? There were some interpersonal things. I don't remember the specific question, but you know how these things are, right? It's like kind of fuzzy. What do I do? It's not clear. So we talked through it, and he said, wouldn't it be nice if there was a place where this kind of advice was just given? And we thought, yeah, that would be nice. There's probably 2 or 3 people who would listen to that and maybe ask a question or two. And so we decided, you know what? We know podcasts. Let's make a podcast. This is 2016, so it's been 5 years now. And we thought, we're going to make a podcast where we answer questions that people ask us. And to start out, no one has asked us any questions, so we're going to make up some questions and pretend like people asked them, and we're going to answer them on the air. And so we did an episode, and we put it out there. We didn't even have a website or anything. We just threw the episode out there and tweeted about it, and people started listening. And sure enough, people started writing in with questions. And I thought, there's probably 5 episodes worth of content here before we're completely bone dry, And but here we are, 272 episodes later and 5.5 years, and there is no end in sight. We have a backlog of soft skills related questions from software engineers that's over 500 questions long now. People just have a lot of questions about how to navigate their career in a technical field.
Wow. Well, congratulations. That's awesome to hear. I'm curious, how long did it take before the questions started flowing in? Was it immediate or was there kind of a ramp up period?
I think it's been a steady ramp for 5 years, but they started flowing in, 1 or 2 a week within a couple of weeks of putting out the show. And now we're probably getting, 10 plus per week. So it really ramped up pretty fast.
That's awesome. Before we get too far into the details of the soft skills, and I've got a bunch of questions for you about the podcast and the topics that you cover there. Can you define, we hear this term soft skills quite a bit, but what are soft skills? What are a couple of examples of soft skills? What does that mean, really?
It's funny. I don't know if I've ever actually thought to define it. I usually define soft skills in terms of what they are not. Okay. So it's almost like it's a gigantic Venn diagram that includes everything that's not a technical part of doing your job. So for a software engineer, it's not the code. It's not the programming language choice. It's not the hardware you're running on. It's everything else. So that includes things like, how do I negotiate for salary when I've got a job offer? Here's a good one. How do I tell my coworker that their feet stink? Was one of my favorites.
I'm going to come back to that one.
Yeah. That's a classic. How often should I change jobs? Let's see. Should I go to conferences? How do I recover from making a mistake? How do I get good motivation to work when I'm working from home? How do I sign a non-disclosure agreement? Should I move into product management? Should I move into engineering management? How do I ask for a promotion? How do I manage my time at work? How do I say no to people when they're asking questions where the answer is no, but I don't want to say no? Anyway, just so many questions like that. There's actually a universe of questions that I just never even thought existed.
Can you pick a couple of either the most interesting or the most common questions that you and Jameson have fielded over the years? And share, what were the answers that you came up with? And if the stinky feet one was really included in there, I would love to hear how the two of you answered that one.
Well, the first thing you need to know about our show is that we are first and foremost here for comedy. So when you get our answers, they are silly, they are fun, and Jameson is the wise one, and my job is to be the laugh track. You may have gathered that already from this interview, but it's interesting. I have gone through our questions. At this point, we've answered 500 questions. We've got 500 in the backlog, and I've been looking for common themes, and it's actually very hard for me to pinpoint themes. The questions are just all over the map, but the answers almost always boil down to the same answer, which is, who should I talk to about this, and what should I say? And should I quit my job? Right? Like,
that seems to be a running theme. Should I quit my job?
Yeah. We've thought about renaming the show to the Quit Your Job Show, which is just like, there's better jobs out there. This job sucks. And a lot of people, I think maybe that is a common theme in questions. A lot of people are writing in and they describe a situation, and then there's this underlying question of, is this normal? Is this amount of suffering normal? And I find that our job is to give them a perspective and say, yeah, I've seen that. Like, that's normal. Or no, that's not normal. You need to quit that job.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to take just a real quick pause here and share with our listeners that teampipeline.us is where you can learn more about how we help medical device and other product engineering or manufacturing teams develop turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines to characterize, inspect, assemble, manufacture, and perform verification testing on your devices. We're talking with Dave Smith of the Soft Skills Engineering podcast today. So maybe there aren't like the most common questions that you can recall, but can you think of what are a couple of the craziest, most out there, zany questions that you've encountered?
Well, we're going to have to go to the stinky feet one for that one.
Yes,
So,
I was hoping we'd get there. Okay.
Let's see if I can just pull that one up. Here we go. Episode 242. Someone writes in and says, I sit at a desk with 3 other people. One of those people does a great job on personal hygiene. The other 2, not so much. I have dropped a couple of hints about it. I mentioned it as a good idea not to wear the same pair of shoes every day so your feet don't start to smell. Some days my stomach will churn from the smells that inevitably waft over.
Man.
What should I do? I'm worried if I tell my boss to talk to them, my boss will mark me as a troublemaker. To make things worse, one of them sits opposite and puts his feet under my desk. So let's be frank, this awful stench is right under my nose. Oh, man. That one is just such a good question. We always refer to it. I don't even remember. Honestly, I don't even remember what we said.
That's excellent. That's fantastic. Do you guys discuss the answers to these questions beforehand, or is it just in real time, kind of shooting from the cuff?
We sometimes do, especially for the more sensitive ones where it's like, there's a really serious question. And we used to, at the beginning of the podcast, we used to really go deep and talk and make notes and then kind of collaborate. And nowadays we've kind of gotten into a rhythm. And I think one of the things that makes the podcast popular is that Jameson and I have a really good chemistry. Like he and I we don't think alike all the time, but we just complement each other really well. And so we can just jump in sometimes and answer these questions. And frankly, both of us have so many years of experience that we've seen a lot of things now, And so oftentimes we can draw from our own experience and say, oh yeah, that's happened to me. Here's what it looked like.
The slogan for your podcast is, it takes more than great code to be a great engineer. Based on the context of our conversation so far, I think we can kind of all guess where that's going, but I'd like to hear your answer anyway. What does it mean? It takes more than great code to become a great engineer.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this idea that if I can just sit down and crank out this genius levels of code as a software engineer, I can be an amazing engineer and do amazing things. But the fact of the matter is that if you are unable to convince others of your ideas, to be a supportive team member, and to help your business, you will be stifled. The effectiveness or the scale at which you can make a positive difference in the world will be severely limited. The best engineers in the world are not those that are the smartest. They're not those that write the best code or the most clever algorithms. They are those who can build camaraderie and trust with teammates. They are those that know how to ask the right and important questions. They're those that know how to be a good team member and a good leader. And so many things that require you to work with other people. In fact, just when you think about some of the most impactful software in the world, in almost every case, it was not just some individual sitting there and then throwing code out to the world. It was a team of individuals that grew over time and was able to bring in lots of other people who have skills they don't have and help them to be effective. And then, and only then, did they actually become influential and make a positive difference in the world.
So even though typically anyway, engineers spend a lot more time on the technical aspects of the work than they do on the non-technical aspects, you're saying that even though that's the case, there's, I don't know, maybe it's 80% of the time they're spending on technical work and 20% of the time they're spending on like communication and time management and the soft skills things. It is those engineers that have strong soft skills that eventually are able to move up into leadership and management positions. Even though that's a minority of the time that they might be spending. Of course, I guess once you get into leadership, then you're spending probably a majority of your time on more of the soft skills side than the technical side.
That's definitely, what you said is definitely true. But even among those engineers that choose not to go into formal management, even they, I think, have to be skilled in the soft skills arena to be able to be effective as engineers. Just to give an example, I've got a good friend of many years who has chosen not to go into formal management, but who has made himself very valuable on every team he's been on by helping the team to build camaraderie and trust with each other, helping them to establish good practices and patterns, good policies, good designs. And he does that all through unofficial influence. He's a great partner to his manager as well. His manager can say, how do we help this team? And he can provide that kind of input. And so he is so much more effective than just the code he writes, even though the code he writes is also excellent.
Nice. Okay. Well, Dave, you are a VP of engineering, which is a pretty high level position. If you had to choose between someone to add to your team with excellent technical skills, but poor soft skills, and someone with pretty good, say maybe 7 out of 10 technical skills, but really fantastic soft skills, which do you choose?
Well, first of all, I'll say that soft skills are a requirement regardless of your technical skill. So you could be a 10 out of 10 on the tech skill, rating scale, but we're not going to hire you if your soft skills are very poor. And you might think, well, how do I know that? Well, there are ways that we ask, both in the interview, but also with feedback from your previous peers and others. And I have had a few instances where I had a very capable engineer technically apply for a job over the years, and we had to say no because we got such strong negative indicators on the soft skills side. So it's not so much that I would pick between those two, but rather I would say there absolutely is a minimum required level of soft skills.
What are some of the questions that you ask to determine whether people have good soft skills or not?
So I like to ask questions where I, instead of just saying like, what would you do or what do you think makes a good communicator, I like to ask questions about what people actually have done. So I'll ask questions like, hey, tell me about a time when you had a conflict with your manager. How did you resolve it? What did you do? Or tell me about a time when you needed to communicate a complex topic to another engineer. Like, how did you go about communicating that? Tell me about a time you received negative constructive criticism, meaning someone had some critiques of the way you work. How did you respond? And people will tell you. They'll tell you exactly what they did. And I think even people who are insistent on kind of sugarcoating, they'll tell you enough that you need to know. And some of these things we say, okay, yeah, negative marks in this one area, but it's coachable. And sometimes we say, that's a strong negative mark that I don't think we can coach that, or we don't have the capacity to coach that on our team right now. So this isn't someone that we can take on. They won't be successful with us.
Let's say that I've gone through a few years working professionally in a technical position, and I've gotten some feedback from maybe my manager, maybe even from other teammates, that my soft skills are not excellent. People don't love working with me. But I really want to get better. I want to improve. What are some things that I can do to improve my soft skills?
This is great. If you have people at your company that are willing to tell you that, that first of all means your soft skills are probably not that bad. Because they felt safe enough to tell you.
Good point. Okay.
It's actually a very good sign. And I would pull those people in close. So the first thing you need to do when someone comes to you like that, in my opinion, is first of all, you thank them because they are giving you a gift. And I got to tell you, like when your peers go out of their way to tell you something like that, it's scary for them. It's also scary for you, but think about them for a minute. So when you say, when you lead with thank you for bringing this to my attention, you help disarm the situation because they don't know how you're going to react, right? There's not a lot to gain for them when they come to you like that. And there's a lot to lose. You could freak out. Like, I reject that. Like, I don't think you're right. I think you're an idiot. Who knows? Like, you're really putting your neck out there when you do that. So first and foremost, say thank you. And then the next thing you need to do is you need to have them share with you specific examples of things you did. It is extremely difficult to act on generic, ambiguous feedback. For example, if someone were to say to you, I just don't think your communication skills are very good. What would you work on? What would you change? You can't act on that. But if someone came to you and said, when I read your emails, they're so long and repetitive that I find myself getting lost in the message you're trying to send. Now you've got something you can work on, right? That is also a communication issue, but you probably never would have guessed that was the thing. And so first of all, try to get them to give you specific examples. Now, again, this is a bit of a dance because that takes effort on their part, effort that they are really doing out of the goodness of their heart in most cases. So you have to be very encouraging and just exuding gratitude. And then once you hear the specifics, then you can say, thank you. I usually like to take time to think on that and set up some time for a couple of days later to come back and say, all right, here's what I've heard you say. Is this right? Because one of the things with soft skills criticism is that it is almost always a blind spot for us. Nobody sets out to be, for example, a bad communicator. Like, nobody goes to work and says, how can I be worse at communicating today? So you're already trying to be a good communicator, likely. Maybe not trying hard enough, but you're trying. And so when someone tells you to be better, it's not helpful. So it's almost always a blind spot. And that's why I say go back to them and clarify exactly what you heard and make sure that what you heard is what they wanted you to hear. Then share with them things that you're going to do to improve. So you might say, all right, thank you so much. Listen, could I ask you for a favor? I hear you. My emails are too long. They're too repetitive, and you're getting lost in the message. Can I send you some sample emails that I'm considering sending over the next couple of weeks and just have you give me like a thumbs up or thumbs down on the length and brevity, and let them say yes or no. Sometimes they'll say, no, I'm too busy for that. Or sometimes they'll say yes and be too busy anyway. But ask them if they will. And then of course, more gratitude, more thankfulness, and see how that goes. Play that for a few weeks and then iterate. So that's kind of my general pattern for responding to feedback. Now, unfortunately, in the software industry and probably in many other industries, these kinds of moments where someone comes to you with feedback like that are very rare. And this might happen to you once every few years. And so, you didn't ask this question, but I would say in order to actually get that feedback, you need to make people know that you're open to it, and you need to ask them for very specific questions. So just like you want them to share specific examples, you need to ask them specific questions. So instead of saying like, what feedback do you have for me? You could say something like, how's my written communication? Like, how would you grade it on a scale of 1 to 10? Am I brief enough? Am I clear and to the point? And then they can answer with a very specific answer. So that's kind of that's my pattern.
That's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. I consider myself to be an introvert, and I think maybe a lot of technical people also consider themselves to be introverts. And it can require a lot of energy to be social with people. I think and being social is loosely correlated with soft skills. What advice do you have for introverts out there who are in these technical fields, who are probably really good at the work that they do, but have a really hard time just, getting out there and talking to other people? And maybe they're super nice people, but because they're so introverted, others might think that they're maybe not very easy or pleasant to work with. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. So many of the questions we get have either implicit themes of the writer being an introvert, or they just come right out and say, I'm an introvert, and so this is hard for me. I actually consider myself to be an ambivert. I don't know if you've heard that term.
I have not. This is new.
So ambivert is, honestly, it's a cop-out where I can't pin myself
ambidextrous?
Down. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's right.
Okay.
So in some cases, I feel extroverted, but in other situations, I feel introverted. And I think a lot of people are not... they're not squarely in one camp or the other like that. And so they paint themselves with the introvert brush or the extrovert brush, but they don't realize that actually there are situations where I can thrive. So let me give an example. Some people might do really well in big group settings. Like, I'm the center of attention. There's 50 people in the room. There's lots of noise and talking, and they're just energized. This is like the textbook extrovert, right? But then you have introverts, on the other hand, who consider that to be an extremely draining and energy draining experience, and they would have to recover from that. They would tolerate it and then recover from it. And from what you've described, I suspect that's how you feel about yourself. Then I think, though, a lot of introverts actually thrive in one-on-one settings. They don't find it to be as draining as a big group setting. And in fact, they might even find it energizing. And so I think the advice I have, and again, this advice is not based on my own experience, because I find I kind of go between the two camps. But my advice is to find those situations wherein you have high energy, energy is returned to you, and use those situations more so than the opposite. This can be hard to do because sometimes you just have to be in the group, or you just have to be in the isolated, one-on-one environment. The other thing we often advise introverts is to to move communication to an asynchronous channel. So instead of, when someone gives you, like, let's say someone dumps some feedback on you, like we were just talking in a live conversation face to face, if you find that to be a draining moment, try to end the conversation graciously and quickly before it starts to drain you, and then move the conversation to an asynchronous channel like email or instant messaging. So like, and you say to the person, like, look, I am so grateful for your feedback. I want to incorporate it. I need to go process this. Would you mind if I write down what I heard you say, and then I can share that with you in a written form, and then we can discuss in written form and see if that works better for you. So just because someone comes to you in one vector doesn't mean you have to reply in kind in the same vector.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about how introverts perhaps do better with small groups or even one-on-ones versus large groups, because that's me to a T. I detest going to parties where there are a bunch of people that I don't know and I have to mingle and talk with people. That is not my happy place at all. And some people have been surprised that I do this podcast because, well, doesn't that force you to like talk to people and be open? Well, I really enjoy the one-on-one aspect and getting to talk with interesting people in that, kind of one-on-one setting. So I think there's really something to that, and I've never really thought about it specifically like that before, but I think you're onto something there. Introverts sometimes do really enjoy those one-on-one conversations, even though they might not enjoy larger conversations with groups.
I think you're right. And there's a bolt-on I should add there, which is that some introverts, myself included, I know I said I'm an ambivert, but one of the ways I overcome my introversion is when there is an official requirement of me to go and be more extroverted. So, for example, if my team lead says, hey, team, I've asked Dave to lead this design discussion, then suddenly I feel like I have a blank check to go communicate with 5 people at the same time in a meeting and set it up and run it, and it doesn't feel awkward to me anymore, like, well, why is Dave kind of side channeling in here and sneaking into this conversation? It's like, no, I have this special card that says from our team lead, I'm supposed to do this, right? So now suddenly I'm an extrovert, right? So there may be triggers for people that kind of convert them to the other side temporarily.
Yeah, give them permission to step outside their own box. Well, you've been doing the Soft Skills Engineering podcast for, what is it, 5 or 6 years, something like that now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've fielded a lot of these questions and had lots of conversations with Jameson, your co-host, about the answers. If you had, I'm stealing this from, I'm having a brain fart now. 4-day work week. What was the 4-day work week? 4-hour work week.
Something.
Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Stealing this from Tim Ferriss. If you had to create a billboard that said something on it that all, millions and millions of technical people were going to see, what would be on that billboard?
Probably something like, there are better podcasts out there.
Well, like you said, it's for entertainment, right?
Yeah, we're not the best marketers. I don't know what to say.
All right. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think that we should talk about before ending the show? No, I don't think so. We've obviously covered every single aspect of soft skills, so there's no reason to go any further down that one. This is the definitive guide, all-encompassing, end all. We're done. Nothing else needs to be written or said about this topic ever again. What an accomplishment. Thank you, Dave.
Congrats.
I feel like I should patent this episode now with all that knowledge we have. All right. Well, how can people find out more about the Soft Skills Engineering podcast?
Well, if you go to our website at softskills.audio, you can find links to subscribe. If you have a podcast app that you use, if you just search Soft Skills, we tend to show up pretty high on the search results. If you type Soft Skills Engineering, which is the full name of the show, you'll find us.
Well, as I watched or listened to a few of your episodes and saw the format, it's a cool format. It's you and Jameson just talking together as opposed to one of you interviewing a guest. I don't know. Maybe you have interviewed guests as well. I haven't listened to all of them. But typically people write in, right? They send you a question and then you talk about the answer between the two of you. It's a cool format, and I would actually love to start doing some of that myself. So I'm going to put this out there. If any of you listeners have questions or even topics that you would like to hear discussed in the Being an Engineer podcast, please shoot us an email at podcast@teampipeline.us. We would love to hear from you and talk about the questions and topics that you're interested in. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. It was awesome getting to know you and learning everything that there is to know about soft skills. I really appreciate your time.
Congratulations. You learned it all.
I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines, and with product design, visit us at teampipeline.us. Thanks for listening.